Welcome to this week's Chinuch Hashkafa message. It's Parshas Vayakhel. One of the themes that is in a few parshas recently, and of course this parsha with greater emphasis because it's in the beginning, is Shabbos. Now Shabbos can and should play a tremendous role in Chinuch. First of all, Shabbos is an opportunity, the family's together. It's a time to schmooze and discuss things with our children. But also the Kedusha of Shabbos, the holiness of Shabbos, the emunah that Shabbos teaches us. So many aspects of Shabbos is so important and tied in to the way we express and communicate the chinuch to our children. And I wanted to speak about that a little bit. First of all, one of the lessons of Shabbos for us to discuss with our children, coming out of a famous Dvar Torah of this week's Parsha, which tells us, Sheishes Yomim Te'ose Melocha V'yem Hashvi Yilachem Kodesh Shabbos Shabbosin LaHashem, and so on, where the Torah tells us to work for 6 days, but Shabbos should be holy. But the loshen, the expression that's used in the pasuk, of course, is Sheishes Yomim Te'ose. Not 6 days you shall work, but 6 days work shall be done. And the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, had a famous word on this, where he explains in a talk that the word Te'ose means it shall be done is more of a passive. It means something that sort of just gets done, doesn't have tremendous focus or energy that's invested in it. And he spoke about this idea that, of course, Hashem wants us to work during the week. Of course, He wants us to go through the journey of the week and to use things for Torah mitzvahs. But in terms of our work, in terms of our physical engagement, that should be like secondary. It shouldn't deserve our complete focus and whole energy and our investment. Sheishes Yomim, of course we have to work, but Te'oseh Melacha. It just needs to be done like it based on the pasuk, Yigia kapecha kisoichel. The Torah says, the toil of your hands you shall eat. Meaning, not the toil of the brain. Our mind should be fully involved in Yiddishkeit, in Torah and mitzvahs, in Kedusha, in Ruchnius. We have to do Yigia kapecha, it's the work of our hands. So this lends itself to, it's a good word on the Parsha, but of course it lends itself to a great discussion about what is the main part of our life? What is priority? Is it the physical? Is it Gashmias? Or is it Kedusha? Is it the Eibishter? Is it Torah mitzvahs? This is a long discussion and it can go many, many different routes. But it's something that can come out of this Parsha to really talk about. It needs to be spoken about. Because today the dazzling attraction of the Gashmias is so strong that often our kids feel sort of left out a little bit. They don't appreciate maybe the importance, the gift, the greatness of working a little bit harder and tasting the ruchnis and the kedusha and the opportunity to be connected to good values and be connected to Hashem rather than get lost in the emptiness and the attraction of what is really empty in terms of the involvement in the Gashmistic world. This lends itself to Shabbos itself. Shabbos is a holy day. Shabbos often, our children today, in today's day find it a bit of a struggle because especially the long days. Here in Australia, it's summer at the moment. But perhaps if we put our own effort into making the Shabbos table beautiful, to making sure that our children can learn and can have activities on Shabbos, they can understand the beauty of Shabbos, they can appreciate and learn about Shabbos, we'll make it something that they will look forward to, something that is beautiful at home, is so important. There's a beautiful little story. It's a story either for parents, us parents to think about or even to communicate to our children. It's a story I heard once about Rabbi Soloveitchik, in the Rabbi Soloveitchik of America, who as a child we know lived in an environment of Chassidim. And one time on Motzei Shabbos, on Shabbos afternoon, he missed Ma'ariv in his shul. So he went looking for a later Ma'ariv, and in the Chassidish Shtiblach, Shalashudis went very late. So he knew that he'd find a late Ma'ariv. And he went there, and yes, there was a Tish or a Shalashudis going on, and it was singing Nigunim, and it was going and going, but it was way past Motzei Shabbos time. So eventually, as a young child, he was a little bit impatient, so he tugged on the kapota, on the long coat of one of the Chassidim, and he said in Yiddish, Anschuldigt, wenn geht man daven in Ma'ariv? I'm sorry, when we going to daven Ma'ariv? And this older Chossid looks at this child in great surprise, and he said to him, and I'll say it in Yiddish and then translate, he said to him, Was is Ingele? Du bengst noch ein Woch? What is with you, my child? Are you yearning for the week? In other words, what's your rush? It's good here. It's really This is it. This is the ultimate. Being involved in Shabbos. Yes, Hashem wants us to go into the week. He wants us to work. But this is good. What's the rush? So this is something to talk about, but something also to demonstrate. Are we in a rush to say Baruch HaMavdil and to rush home and to open up our iPhones and check our email and so on and so forth? Or do we appreciate Shabbos? And in general, are we, as parents, besides the Dvar Torah, are we setting an example of what is really important? Let me end with a beautiful story for us parents to think about. Maybe some children, older children, if appropriate, you can share this with them as well. But it's such an important story for us to think about. What is really important? What messages are we sending our children? What is it at the end of the day? Not that Torah mitzvahs is important, but that it is the ultimate, it is the only thing, and everything else really revolves around that. I heard from a mashpia who told a story at Fabrengen. He says it was a true story about a teacher who decided to understand the background of the children he was teaching and understand the homes they come from and so on. So he did a survey once in class, and he said to the class, what is the most important thing in life? So one child said, money. No, so he knew, because obviously he must come from an environment where money is talked about and how we're going to pay for this and what we're going to buy this and how much does this cost. And money was the main focus of discussion, and materialism and so on in their home. Maybe that's why the child said money. Understood. The next child puts up his hand and said, what is the most important thing? The child says, Torah learning. So he understood he probably comes from a home where there's an emphasis on learning Torah, kfiyus itim, sharing Dvar Torahs, and just being involved in learning. So that's why the child probably said that. It was an amazing, amazing indication of what happens. And then he goes to the third child and he says, what is the most important thing? And the child says, cholent. And the whole class burst out laughing, and even the melamed, even the teacher was smiling. And after it calms down, he says to the child, can you explain to me, why did you say cholent? The child said, I will tell you. In my house, Torah is so important. Our parents want us to learn. They learn. They go to shurim. We learn. We have extra time for learning. When it comes Shabbos, we say Dvar Torahs. We talk about learning. We talk about Dvar Torahs. My parents share Divrei Torah. We are expected to share Divrei Torah. But he said, so it's very, very important. But something interesting, he says. We can be in the middle of a very Torah discussion, but as soon as the cholent arrives at the table, everything stops. Everything stops, and the cholent is eaten. So I imagine that cholent is even more important than the Torah learning. Whether the story is true or not, I don't know, but the lesson is amazing. It's a small message, it's a subtle message. What is the message we are sending our children? What is the most important thing? From when they're very young, what do they know? Ruchnis is important, and materialism is completely secondary. Gashmis is a secondary thing. Or are we getting carried away with worrying so much about Gashmiistic things that perhaps it's compromising the focus on Ruchnis? Something for all of us to think about, and think about the type of messages that we're giving to our children, and also having that discussion with them. Have a good day and a good Shabbos.